It was supposed to be just another Sunday dinner, polished silverware, wine glasses that caught the soft chandelier light, and the same table where I'd been sitting since I was 12. But that night, something in me shifted. I had watched the men in my family dominate every conversation for years. I had been silent long enough. My name is Celine Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and until that night I thought maybe, just maybe, hard work would finally matter in a family like mine. We were all gathered around the long oak table in my father's estate, just outside Denver. My younger brother, Austin, was halfway through his steak, making small talk about his latest vision for the company. My father, Warren Morgan, had just poured himself a generous glass of Bordeaux when I finally spoke up. I said it calmly, but every word burned on the way out. Dad, I think I've earned the right to be considered. Why wasn't I ever in the running for CEO? The room went still. You could hear the clink of a fork against a plate from the other end. Even Austin stopped chewing. He looked at me like he was waiting for a show. My father didn't look surprised. He didn't even blink. He swirled his wine gently, took a sip, and then turned to me with a coolness I'll never forget. "You're not CEO material, Celine," he said, as if he were reading a weather report. "You were a mistake the moment your mother got pregnant." It didn't hit me like a slap. It hit like silence, the kind that rings in your ears and hollows your chest. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just sat there as my brother smirked, leaned back in his chair, and took another bite like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something shifted in me. I had spent my entire career building the Morgan Group from the inside out, graduating from Stanford with top honors, rescuing departments they had practically written off, restructuring operations, and saving them millions. All while Austin bounced from role to role, barely lasting a quarter before blaming someone else and moving on. My father always said Austin had vision. But the truth? He couldn't read a balance sheet without assistance. And still, they paraded him around like the air. Like I didn't exist. I had hoped, foolishly maybe, that results would finally speak louder than bloodlines. I was wrong. 3 days later, the press release hit. Morgan Group welcomes new CEO, Austin Morgan. No board vote. No formal transition. Just a photograph of Austin in my father's leather chair and a hollow quote about legacy. I didn't show up to Monday's executive meeting. Nobody announced my absence, but they noticed. My chair, third from the head of the table, sat empty. And while Austin cracked a joke about me finally getting a spa day, my father didn't even glance in my direction. They thought I was sulking. I wasn't. I was preparing. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the city lights blinking outside my window like a pulse I no longer felt connected to. The press release had gone out hours earlier. I didn't need to read it, I already knew what it said. Austin Morgan named CEO of the Morgan Group, complete with a glossy photo of him pretending to look capable in my father's chair. A quote about honoring the Morgan legacy, no mention of me. No thanks, not even a passing acknowledgement of the work I'd poured into that company for the past decade. But I remembered. I remembered every late night I spent in that cold office reorganizing systems that were falling apart. I remembered building a forecasting model that saved the company $18 million over 3 fiscal years, a model my father later bragged about to investors without once mentioning who created it. I remembered the sleepless weeks turning around our failing logistics division, managing crises my brother caused, cleaning up after initiatives he abandoned, fixing what he broke while he was busy taking credit for big ideas. I remember my mother too, how she believed in me when no one else did. She passed when I was in college, but before she died, she made sure I would be protected. She left behind a trust, quiet, airtight, legally shielded, never flaunted, never even fully explained. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. I earned my place on merit. But merit was never enough for men like Warren Morgan. He didn't see me as a leader. He saw me as the leftover, an accident. And Austin? He was always the chosen one. Even when he failed, they said he was learning. Even when I succeeded, they said I was lucky. So when the press release dropped, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even respond. I went quiet. Because I knew now there would be no recognition, no seat at their table. And if they weren't going to give me one, I'd build my own. Then I'd take theirs away. Silently. Strategically. Completely. The day after the announcement, I clear my calendar. No calls, no emails, no scheduled meetings. My assistant, Jamie, left me 3 voicemails, each more nervous than the last. I didn't respond. I disappeared, not physically, but where it mattered. From the company systems, from the executive dashboards, from the pulse of the business I had helped shape. For the first time in years, I was off the grid. Everyone assumed I was hurt, licking my wounds somewhere. Some probably thought I had quit. But I wasn't grieving. I was calculating. Men like my father did not respect emotion. They saw it as weakness, noise. But power? Power they couldn't ignore. And I had it, more of it than they ever realized. Hidden beneath shell entities, legacy trusts, and carefully constructed legal layers was the quiet truth. I was the primary financial lifeline of the Morgan Group. Not just in name or sentiment, but through structured capital my mother had secured before her death. That trust controlled 52% of the company's funding. And I had never once used it. Not until now. In the silence, I began to move. I contacted a team of forensic accountants I had worked with years ago, discreet, reliable, precise. Within hours, I granted them secure access to the company's internal systems, bypassing the usual corporate channels. Richard had no idea I still had that level of access. He never cared enough to track it. While the boardrooms buzzed with congratulations and empty optimism about Austin's vision, I was building something else entirely, a case, a strategy, a collapse. It felt strange, operating in the shadows of a company I had once helped keep upright. But that was the difference between them and me. They wanted attention. I wanted impact. So I stayed quiet. I didn't show up to headquarters. I didn't respond to Jamie. I let them believe I was sulking in some corner with a glass of wine and hurt feelings. That was the story they told themselves. It made them feel safe. They had no idea I was preparing to burn down the house they locked me out of, not with fire, but with facts. Not with fury, but with proof. For years, I never touched it. The trust. The one my mother secured in my name before she passed. It was buried behind legal screens, managed by third-party firms, structured so quietly even my father seemed to forget it existed. Or maybe he never cared enough to look closely. He always believed he controlled everything, that his word was law, his name the legacy. But he never understood the fine print. He never realized the lifeline running through the veins of the Morgan Group wasn't his. It was mine. My mother had always seen the truth long before I did. She saw the way my father favored Austin, the way he dismissed me with a smile that said, "Be grateful just to be here." She never argued with him about it, not out loud. But she took action in her own way. Before she died, she worked with her lawyers to secure a trust in my name that would funnel money into the company when needed. Expansions, downturns, emergency capital infusions. Quietly, consistently, and most importantly, with full control granted to me. I didn't know the details until I turned 25. By then, I was already working my way up in the company, still foolish enough to believe that if I just worked harder, they'd see me. So I kept the trust in the background. Never spoke about it. Never used it as leverage. It was her legacy, and I treated it with the kind of reverence you give something sacred. But sacred doesn't mean silent forever. What Richard never bothered to learn, what Austin was too lazy to investigate, was that 52% of the Morgan Group's operating funds came from that trust. Not from loans, not from investors, not from his golden boy son. From me. And with one signature, I could pull it all. No board vote. No oversight. No warning. I had the power to stop payroll, freeze vendor payments, suspend development projects, and sever funding at the source. They thought I was powerless because I never shouted. But I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was loaded. And now they were going to feel it. The numbers never lie. That's what I kept telling myself as I watched the data load onto my screen. My forensic team worked fast, clean, quiet, precise. They had no allegiance to the Morgan name, only to the truth. And within days, they handed it to me. The rot beneath the surface, hidden in plain sight, ignored by design. Austin had been bleeding the company dry. It started with small things. Inflated consulting fees to companies that didn't exist. Vendor contracts with names no one recognized. Supply orders with no inventory attached. But when we pulled the payment records, it escalated quickly. He had approved hundreds of thousands in marketing campaigns that never launched. A $2.1 million transfer to a brand new firm supposedly handling digital strategy, run by a college drinking buddy of his. 3 weeks later, the company disappeared. No deliverables, no refunds, just gone. The trail of signatures was unmistakable. His digital approval was on every invoice, every contract, every transfer. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I saw my father's name too. Richard had co-signed several of the payments. Some were subtle. A casual nod here, a late-night sign-off there. But a few were bold, clear, deliberate approvals of transfers that no responsible CEO would ever allow without scrutiny. Whether he was too arrogant to ask questions or too complicit to care, I could not say. But either way, he had given Austin a blank check and turned his back while the company crumbled underneath them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel shocked. I felt confirmed. I had always known Austin wasn't just incompetent, he was reckless. And now, with a pile of evidence, I saw the damage up close. What stung more was knowing my father had either ignored the signs or helped cover them. They crowned him CEO without asking a single question. They celebrated him while he siphoned the future out of the company one fake invoice at a time. But now I had everything I needed. The paper trail, the bank transfers, the emails, the names of the shell companies, the timeline. They thought I would come back begging for a seat at the table. They had no idea I was preparing to flip the whole table over. It started with silence. No press release. No internal memo. Just a quiet signature on a clause buried deep in the trust paperwork. Section 6.3, Financial Mismanagement. It allowed me to temporarily suspend all disbursements if there was evidence of fraud, without notice, without approval.
So I did.
That Friday, I halted every dollar flowing into the Morgan Group. No one knew. Not yet. The first tremor came Monday morning. Payroll didn't hit. Phones started ringing. At first, it was just HR, confused employees, asking why their direct deposits didn't land. Then vendors began calling, saying they hadn't been paid in weeks. Regional managers emailed in a panic. Some tried to reassure their teams, claiming it was just a system glitch. But by noon, panic had replaced confusion. Benefits portals showed inactive. Health insurance was suspended. Vision and dental access revoked. One by one, employees realized something deeper was wrong. The company's logistics hub in Indiana shut down operations entirely. Line workers refused to step onto the floor without guaranteed pay. Supervisors locked warehouse gates. Legal liability, they said. And still, I said nothing. I watched it unfold from my apartment, laptop open, reports updating in real time. No money moved. No invoices cleared. The machine I had fueled for years without recognition was sputtering without its quiet engine. They didn't know what was wrong, only that everything was slipping. By 3:16 p.m., my father stormed into the CFO's office, like a man on fire. I imagined it perfectly, the slammed door, his voice rising with each question. Where's the money? Why didn't payroll go through? Dan, the CFO, would have been sweating through his shirt as he pointed to the email I had already seen. One sentence said it all. All funding disbursements from the Morgan Family Trust have been suspended pending review by the primary investor. He would have asked, who the hell is the primary investor? And Dan would have told him the truth. We don't know. It's confidential. They assumed it was a hedge fund, a competitor, a hostile move. It never crossed their minds that the hands choking the company were the same ones that once held it together.
Mine.
By Tuesday morning, the boardroom was on fire, not literally, but in every other way that mattered. Phones wouldn't stop ringing. Department heads were in full-blown panic. Employees were threatening legal action. Vendors were halting shipments. The company wasn't just stumbling, It was unraveling at the seams. And Richard Morgan was losing his grip. He stormed through the executive floor, barking orders no one could follow, demanding answers no one had. His usual arrogance, that air of untouchable power, was cracked and crumbling. He cornered Dan, the CFO, again, this time in the hallway outside the elevator, and demanded to know who had pulled the plug on their funding. Dan's face was pale. "It's coming from the trust," he said quietly. Everything was routed through it. The operating accounts weren't funded this cycle. Richard's voice rose. "That's not possible. The trust funds are locked in. Automatic." Dan hesitated, then showed him the email again. Clause 6.3. Financial mismanagement. The disbursements were halted. No one here has access to override it. Richard stared at the screen like it was written in another language. "Then find out who did this," he snapped. "Find out who's behind it. I want names. I want leverage. I want this fixed today." But there were no names. That was the brilliance of it. The trust had been structured through blind legal entities. He had signed off on it himself years ago, probably without reading a word. That's what he always did. Skimmed, assumed, delegated. Now he was trapped inside a system built to protect someone else's power. The board called an emergency meeting. 12 members, all rattled, all asking the same questions. Why were the accounts frozen? Why hadn't they been informed? What was Austin doing about it? Richard tried to rally, claiming it was corporate sabotage. "Someone's targeting us," he insisted. "We're being attacked." But his voice lacked its usual conviction. His hands trembled just enough to betray him. No one was buying it anymore. Not the excuses. Not the bravado. This wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't sabotage from the outside. It was someone much closer. And the board could feel it. They weren't expecting me. That was clear the moment I walked through the glass doors of the executive boardroom. The room went quiet. Conversations froze mid-sentence. I didn't carry a laptop or a legal team or a single folder aside from the one tucked neatly beneath my arm. I didn't need backup. I was the backup plan, the one they never counted on. 12 board members sat in tense silence. Richard was at the head of the table, red-faced, restless, still pretending he held the reins. Austin sat beside him in a tailored suit that didn't quite fit, his smirk fading fast as his eyes met mine. I didn't go to the end of the table like I used to. I took the seat directly across from my father. He didn't speak first. I did. "I'm the individual who suspended the funding," I said calmly. "And I'm here to explain why." The silence broke like glass. A few board members shifted in their seats. One of them, the general counsel, leaned forward. I opened the folder and slid a set of documents across the table. I own 52% of the Morgan Group's operational funding through the Morgan Family Trust. That control was granted to me by my mother, and until now, I never used it. But for the last 8 months, Austin has been funneling company funds into fake vendors and shell companies offshore. I turned the next page. And here are the approvals. His signature. The transfers. The invoices. And here, I said, sliding one more sheet, are the emails where Richard authorized several of those transactions without review. Richard shot to his feet. "This is a lie. You manipulated this." "I have recordings," I interrupted. "Phone calls. Wire trails. Dates and details. This isn't revenge. This is responsibility." The board erupted, questions, whispers, papers rustling. The general counsel raised her voice over the noise. "We need to pause. These are serious allegations, and the documents support them. Until a full investigation is completed, I recommend both Richard and Austin step down immediately." Neither of them argued. Austin was pale, frozen. Richard just stared at me, stunned, as the walls finally began to close in. They built a legacy without me. Now I was here to rebuild it, without them. 3 days later, it was official. Austin Morgan was indicted on multiple counts of corporate fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. The arrest happened quietly, no press conference, no cameras, just a booking photo and a headline. Morgan Group heir arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme.
He didn't resist.
He didn't have the energy to. By then, the evidence was airtight. Every fake invoice, every offshore transfer, every late-night email he thought would disappear. He had signed them all. I had given the investigators everything they needed, and the trust's financial records sealed it shut. Richard wasn't charged, but he didn't walk away untouched. The board, following the council's recommendation, voted unanimously to strip him of all decision-making power. His title was reduced to founder, non-voting. They gave him a small office on a lower executive floor, no calendar, no authority, no visitors. Just a frosted glass door with a nameplate and silence on the other side. He tried to fight it, of course. Tried calling in favors, charming old allies. But the damage was done. The illusion was gone. And me? The board didn't hesitate. In a closed session the morning after the showdown, they voted again, this time unanimously naming me interim CEO. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I showed up early the next day, sleeves rolled up, and got to work. The first thing I did was reinstate payroll through an emergency release from the trust. Every employee, from factory workers to executives, received back pay within 48 hours. I worked with HR to draft personal communications, apologized directly to our vendors, and rebuilt the broken bridges one by one. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to repair what had been neglected. They had dismissed me as the quiet one, the mistake, the girl in the background. Now, every department looked to me. Every voice that had once been ignored was heard. And for the first time, the Morgan Group wasn't running on arrogance or entitlement. It was running on leadership, real leadership. And it was just the beginning. He called me 2 weeks later. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was softer than I remembered. I was hoping we could talk, he said. Maybe lunch. Just us. There was a long pause before I answered. All right.
Tomorrow.
Noon. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, one he used to take clients to back when his signature still meant something. He was already there when I walked in, sitting alone at a corner table, his glass untouched. He stood when he saw me, but I didn't hug him. We sat. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, years in the making. I didn't mean what I said that night, he muttered, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. About you being a mistake. I was angry. You know I care. I looked at him, not with anger, but clarity. I believe you were angry, I said. And I believe you care. In your own way. He let out a shaky breath, maybe expecting that to be enough. But I wasn't there to make him feel better. You also believed I wasn't enough, I continued. And that belief shaped everything. Every decision you made about me. About Austin. About this company. He looked away. I spent years trying to prove myself to you. Waiting for a moment that would never come. But I don't need it anymore, I said. You taught me what not to be. For that, I'm grateful. I folded my napkin, stood up, and gave him a small, polite smile. I wish you peace, Dad. Then I walked away, not out of anger, but out of freedom. I didn't look back. Upstairs, back in my office, sunlight spilled across the desk where his nameplate used to sit. My name was on it now, and I had earned every inch of that space. I was no longer waiting for a seat at their table. I had built my own. And when they tried to tear me down, I didn't break. I rose.